Truth is like mercury. It's hard to hold on to, but it reflects everything with perfect, chilling clarity. Experience the fluid nature of reality in our latest series of high-tech cinematic thrillers. Subscribe now and follow the flow of the truth with us.
Summer, my son turned 8. He learned the entire national anthem on his little three-quarter size violin. And he learned it because he had been told he would play it at his grandfather's 70th birthday party. My father-in-law had asked him personally, back in March, crouched down to my son's level the way he did with all the grandkids, and said, "Theodore, I want you to be the one. Just you." My son's name is Theodore, but everyone calls him Teddy, and he took that request the way an 8-year-old takes a sacred trust. He practiced every single day from March to July. He practiced until the calluses on his small fingertips hardened into something he was proud of, until he could play it with his eyes closed, until my husband had to gently remind him that other people in the building might want to sleep before 9 on a Saturday. The morning of the party, I spent 40 minutes helping him decide between two bow ties. A navy one with tiny anchors and a deep green one his grandfather had once said matched his eyes. He held one in each hand in front of the hallway mirror, turning his chin left and right, taking it as seriously as anything he had ever done. He chose the green one. I told him it was the right call. He believed me without a flicker of doubt, the way kids believe you before the world has taught them to double-check. My husband loaded the car. He's the steady one in our marriage, the kind of man who irons 2 shirts the night before just in case, who keeps a phone charger and a granola bar and a small first aid kit in the glove box because you never know. He had Teddy's violin case wiped down and the sheet music tucked into the side pocket even though Teddy hadn't needed sheet music in 2 months. While I stood in the kitchen second-guessing whether to bring a salad to a catered party, he put his keys in my hand and said, "We're going to be late if you keep negotiating with yourself." So we went. The drive out to the lake house was about an hour. My father-in-law had bought the place 6 years ago, a big cedar-shingled thing on a private cove, and the whole extended family treated it like the family seat now, the place where every milestone happened. Teddy pressed his forehead to the window and watched the strip malls give way to farmland, give way to the long gravel road through the pines. "Is Grandpa gonna cry when I play it?" he asked me. "He might," I said, "in a good way." Aunt Renata cried at her own wedding, he informed me, like this was relevant data. "So crying can be happy." "That's exactly right." He nodded and settled back, satisfied with his own conclusion, and I watched him in the rearview mirror with his green bow tie and his hands already shaping invisible notes against his knees. And I felt that specific warmth you get from watching your kid be wholly, uncomplicatedly excited about something. He wasn't thinking about any of the adult tangles. He just had a job, and he practiced, and he was ready, and that was his whole world, and it was a good one. My phone buzzed as we turned onto the gravel road. A text from my mother-in-law. "When you get here, park by the boathouse and come find me first. Just you. Leave the boy in the car with his father for a minute. I need to talk to you before you come up." I read it twice. "Everything okay?" my husband asked. "Your mom wants to talk to me first, alone, before we come in." He glanced over and I watched him do the quiet math he does when something doesn't add up. "About what?" "No idea." I told Teddy I was going to go say hi to Grandma and check where he was supposed to set up, and that he should stay with Daddy and practice his bow because Grandma hadn't seen him bow properly yet. This delighted him. He immediately started rehearsing his little stage bow against the back of the passenger seat. I walked up the path toward the boathouse, where my mother-in-law was waiting on the little wooden deck, her hands folded in front of her in that particular managing way she had, the way she stood when she'd already decided something and was just waiting for you to come around to it. "Hi," I said. "What's going on?" She breathed out through her nose. "I wanted to catch you before you came up so it wouldn't be a whole scene in front of everyone. So tell me." She looked past me toward the car for half a second. "Your father-in-law's brother is in from Phoenix. You know Uncle Webb's family. His granddaughter Mariel is staying with them this summer. She's 9. She's apparently quite the little cellist. Conservatory track, the whole thing. And your father-in-law thought it would be lovely, since she's only here this one weekend, to have her play something at the party." "Okay," I said carefully. "That's nice. The kids can both play." "Well," she adjusted the bracelet on her wrist. "That's the thing. We thought one performance was plenty. People get restless. And honestly, Mariel is at a different level. It's a different kind of thing to listen to. So we're going to have her do the anthem, and Teddy can just enjoy the party like everybody else." I stood very still. Somewhere up the hill, a screen door banged and someone laughed. He's been practicing since March, I said. My voice came out flat. Your husband asked him in person. He told him just you. I know. She had the decency to wince, but it was a small wince, the kind you give a thing you've already filed away as settled. And he loved doing it, didn't he? All that practicing. That's its own reward, really. Learning an instrument. That's its own reward. I repeated it back to her because I needed to hear how it sounded out loud. It's Dad's birthday, she said, and her voice slid into the register she used when she wanted me to stop being difficult. 70. It's his day, and he should get the day he wants. And what he wants is for it to feel special and elevated. And Mariel is just at a level that... He's 9 months older than 9, I said. Teddy, he's 8 3/4. He's not competing in a conservatory. It's his grandfather's birthday, and he was asked. I need you to be a grown-up about this. She said it gently, which was somehow worse. Don't make it a thing. Dad is stressed about the party. There's 100 people coming. The caterer was an hour late this morning. The last thing he needs is friction. Can you just, for one afternoon, let it be easy? I looked at her for a long moment. The lake was flat and bright behind her. I made myself take one breath in, one breath out. I'll come up on my own, I said. Give me a minute. She reached for my arm. I stepped back, just slightly, and she let her hand fall. And she gave me one more look, the kind that's checking whether you're going to be a problem. And then she turned and went up the path toward the house. I stood on the boathouse deck and watched a heron stand motionless at the far end of the dock, and I thought about the scuff on our hallway carpet where Teddy stood to practice, the exact spot, worn slightly paler than the rest. I thought about him telling the kid down the hall that he was going to play for 100 people. Then I walked back to the car. My husband was crouched in the gravel next to Teddy, the two of them examining something, a beetle probably. They looked up at the same time. My husband read my face in about a second and a half. Hey, Ted, he said easily, find me the 5 flattest rocks in this whole driveway. The flattest ones for skipping. I bet you can't find 5 really good ones. Teddy was off immediately, scanning the gravel with total focus. My husband stood and took 2 steps toward me. What happened? They gave the anthem to somebody else. The words felt like marbles in my mouth. Uncle Webb's granddaughter. She's 9. She's some cello prodigy. She's only here this weekend, so they decided one kid playing is plenty and hers is the one. They decided this without telling us. Your mother just told me at the boathouse. He was quiet for a moment. It's a specific quiet, his, the kind that means he's deciding how angry to let himself get. 3 flat ones so far, Teddy called. Great hunting, my husband called back. Then, to me, Lo, how do you want to handle it? I have to tell him. I looked at our son, who was holding up a rock for inspection from 20 feet away. I just don't know if I can sit up there for 3 hours after. You don't have to figure that part out yet. 4, Teddy announced. I went and crouched down next to my son in the gravel. He showed me his rocks, lined up on his palm. I looked at them seriously because they deserve to be taken seriously. These are good, I said. That one especially. It's the flattest, he agreed. I took his free hand in both of mine. He looked at me, picking up on the shift the way he always did, faster than I ever expected. Hey, bud, I have to tell you something, and it's a little bit of a sad thing, but you and me and Daddy are going to be totally fine, okay? He searched my face. Okay. The plan changed for the music today. There's another kid here this weekend, a cousin you haven't met, and she's going to play the song at the party instead. He didn't say anything for a second. He looked down at the rocks in his hand. Did I play it wrong? My throat closed so fast, I nearly couldn't get the next words out. No. No, you play it perfectly. This has nothing to do with how you play. She's part of the family that came in from far away, and they wanted to give her a turn while she's here. It's not about you. You didn't do anything. He thought about that, so I don't get to play it. Not today, bud. He looked at his shoes. The green bow tie sat very neatly under his chin. I watched him work through it, and I would have given anything to take it onto myself instead. Can I still go to the party? Yes. Can I bring my violin? Just to have it? Of course you can. He nodded, with that startling resilience little kids have before they learn the adult habit of performing the size of their hurt. Okay, he said. Then is there cake? There's a giant cake. Okay. He stood up and held his rocks out to my husband. I got 4 really flat ones. My husband caught my eye over his head and held it for a second, holding steady so I wouldn't have to hold all of it alone. We went up the hill. The party had spilled across the whole back lawn, white tents and round tables and a bar set up near the water, easily 100 people, my husband's side and Webb's side, and a wide assortment of family friends I have recognized. My father-in-law was holding court near the dock in a linen blazer, glowing, 70 years old, and loving every minute. Webb's granddaughter, Mariel, the cellist, I spotted near the tent, a poised, serious-looking kid with her cello already propped beside her on a stand, the way a professional sets up. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She was 9 and she'd been told she had a turn, same as Teddy had been. Teddy saw the cello before I could decide whether to steer him away from it. He looked at it. He looked at me. He looked back at the cello. I watched him put the whole thing together in that wordless way. Kids assemble a picture from the pieces you've handed them. Then he reached up and took my hand, and I held it, and we found a table. My mother-in-law had us seated near the middle. My father-in-law, when he saw us, raised a hand and called Teddy's name, and Teddy went over and got a hug and a "there's my guy." And I watched my son hug his grandfather with his whole body, and I had to look at the lake for a second. The party moved the way these things move, in waves of toasts and clinking and food. The caterer, who'd been an hour late, had recovered. There was salmon, and there were little lamb things on skewers. And Teddy ate 4 of the lamb things and told the woman next to us, a friend of my mother-in-law's, named something I didn't catch. A very long story about a snapping turtle he'd seen at school. He did not mention the violin. He did not mention the anthem. He was 8, and he was managing a disappointment that would have flattened a lot of grown adults, and he was managing it by telling a stranger about a turtle. I held it together through the salmon. I held it together through the speeches, my husband's cousin doing a charming bit, my father-in-law's old college roommate doing a rambling one. I excused myself after the toasts and went into the house to use the bathroom, and I stood at the sink with the water running and pressed my wet palms over my face. Not crying. Just standing in the one room where I didn't have to look fine. I had ordered the bow tie online. I had sat with him while he practiced. 100 evenings, crouched at the end of the hallway clapping every time he got through it clean. Just you, his grandfather had said, and Teddy had carried that like a medal. And nobody had called me. Not my father-in-law, not my husband's brother, not my mother-in-law, until she'd cornered me at a boathouse so it wouldn't be a scene. I dried my hands and I went back out. And as I crossed the big front room, my phone buzzed in my hand. I assumed it was my husband. It was my father-in-law. I stopped walking. My father-in-law did not text. He was a man who left voicemails that were 3 full minutes of him narrating his own confusion about how voicemail worked. I'd seen him type once, and it was like watching someone defuse a bomb with a single finger. The message said, "Come down to the dock, the far end, away from the tent. Right now, please." I looked at it. Up the hall, I could hear the party. 100 warm voices, someone testing a microphone. I went out the back and down across the lawn to the dock, past the tent, all the way to the far end where the boards went out over the deep water, and the heron had finally given up and flown off. My father-in-law was standing at the very end with his back to the party, looking out at the cove. He still had the linen blazer on. He heard me coming and turned. "There you are," he said. "Hi, what's going on?" He looked at me for a moment, in a way he had, like he was making sure he understood a thing all the way down before he said anything about it. "My wife told you about the music at the boathouse before we came up." "Before you came up." Something moved across his face. "I didn't know that's how it was handled. I want you to know that." I thought, I'll be honest with you, this morning, when she brought up Mariel playing, I said yes without thinking it through. Webb was standing right there. It seemed like a nice gesture, and I didn't connect it. I didn't think about Teddy in that moment, and that's my failure, and I've been sitting up there at my own party for an hour with it sitting wrong in my stomach. "He's been practicing since March," I said. "I know. I'm the one who asked him." His jaw tightened. "I asked that boy myself. I told him just you. I remember saying it. And then I let it get traded away over canapes this morning, because it was easier than telling my brother no." He turned back toward the water and put both hands on the railing, and he was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed, gone slow and deliberate. The voice of a man who has been choosing his words carefully for a long time and has decided to stop. "Can I tell you something I've never said to you?" he said. "My son, your husband, he's a good man. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about how this family operates. We arrange things. We smooth things. When something is uncomfortable, somebody gets quietly handled so the day can stay pleasant, and the person who gets handled is always the one least likely to make noise about it." He looked at me. "That's been you, in this family, for a long time. You're the one who lets it be easy. And everyone has learned that, and everyone counts on it, and I have benefited from it more than anyone because it kept my parties pleasant." I didn't say anything. "This morning," he said, "when I told my wife I'd been thinking about Teddy, do you know what she said to me? She said, 'Don't worry, I'll talk to her. She won't make a fuss.' Like you were weather to be planned around." He shook his head slowly. "She wasn't wrong either. You wouldn't have made a fuss. You'd have swallowed it and sat up there and clapped for Mariel and driven home and never said a word. And we'd all have let you, and that's the part I can't get past." The microphone up at the tent gave a short feedback squeal. Somewhere, a child laughed. "I want to tell you something," he said, "and I'm telling you down here first because I'd rather you hear it from me before it happens up there." He reached into the inside pocket of his blazer and took out a folded piece of paper, but he didn't hand it to me. He just held it. "You know I sold the parts business 2 years ago," he said. "There's a chunk of money that doesn't need to do anything for a while. I've been telling myself I'd set up an education fund for the grandkids, split it even, very tidy, very fair. I had the paperwork drawn up in the spring." He turned the folded paper over in his fingers. "Last month, I changed it. Before today, I want to be clear. This has nothing to do with this afternoon. It has to do with a thing I've been watching for years and never named. I put the whole fund in trust for Teddy. College, conservatory, whatever that kid wants to do with those hands, all of it, one beneficiary." I stared at him. "I haven't told my son yet. I haven't told my wife. You're the first to know." He folded the paper once more and put it back in his pocket. "And I'm aware of how it'll look, doing it the same week as this. But I'm 70 years old today, and I've spent most of those years keeping the peace. And the peace I kept was always paid for by somebody, and lately I started adding up who paid. I had to put my hand on the railing. You don't have to. There's one more thing." He reached into the other pocket and took out something small, a flat velvet box, the kind that holds a watch. He held it out. I took it and opened it. Inside, on the cushion, was a wristwatch. Old, the crystal slightly clouded, the leather band worn soft and dark. I knew it. It had been his father's. He'd worn it to every family event I'd ever attended, the one heirloom in a family that didn't have many. "That was my dad's," he said. "Teddy's great-great-grandfather. My wife has had her eye on having it cleaned up and given to Mariel's side, if you can believe it, as a gesture to Webb, family closeness, all of that. She mentioned it again this morning." He let out a short breath. "It's not hers to give. It goes down my line. It goes to Teddy, and I'd like you to hold on to it for him until he's old enough not to lose it at recess." I closed the box. Something happened to my voice that I hadn't authorized. I don't even know what to. "I know," he said, and he put one hand on my shoulder, just the steady weight of it. "I know." We stood there a second with the water moving under the dock. "I'd like to go back up," he said, "and say something to everyone." "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to." He looked at me. "But I'm going to, and I'd like you standing next to me when I do." I thought about Teddy at the table telling a stranger about a turtle. I thought about the pale, worn patch on our hallway carpet. I thought about just you, and 4 months, and a green bow tie chosen so carefully in front of a mirror. "Okay," I said. He nodded once and walked up the dock, and I went with him, and we crossed the lawn toward the big tent where the toasts were. He didn't tap a glass. He didn't raise his voice. He just walked to the front near the microphone and stood there with a particular kind of stillness, and the conversations nearest him slowed and then stopped, and then the ones beyond those, until the whole tent went quiet in the way a crowd goes quiet when it can feel that something is about to be said. My mother-in-law, near the cake, set down whatever she was holding. My husband's brother straightened up. Webb's granddaughter sat with her hands folded over her cello, watching like everyone else. "Thank you all for coming," my father-in-law said. 70 years. I'm grateful for every one of you. I'm going to say something now that I'd usually save for a private moment, except I've decided this family does too many of its important things in private so that they can be smoothed over. And I'm not interested in smoothing this one. He found Teddy in the crowd. Teddy was on my husband's lap at our table, his little violin case leaning against his chair leg. Back in March, I asked my grandson Teddy to play the national anthem at this party. Just him. He said yes, and that boy has practiced every single day since. 4 months. I have it on good authority his fingers have calluses. A small ripple of warmth through the tent. Teddy sat up a little. "This morning," my father-in-law went on, "I let that promise get rearranged without thinking about what it would cost him. And nobody picked up a phone to warn his mother, who drove him an hour out here with his bow tie and his violin. She was pulled aside at the boathouse and told to keep it quiet so the day would stay nice." His voice was perfectly even. "I'm not saying this to make anyone feel bad on my birthday. I'm saying it because it's true, and because I spent too long letting true things go unsaid in this family when they were inconvenient, and I'm done with that habit." He looked at his wife for a moment. She looked at the grass. "Mariel," he said, turning to the girl by the tent, gently, "you are a wonderful musician, and I'm honored you're here. I'd love to hear you play. And I'd like to hear my grandson play too. Both of you." There was never a reason it had to be one. He looked back out at the crowd. "I broke a promise to an 8-year-old this morning because it was easier than telling people no. I'd like to fix it before I blow out any candles." The tent was the particular quiet of a room where nobody is looking at the people they most want to look at. Then my father-in-law held out his hand toward our table. "Teddy," he said, "will you still play it for me?" I watched my son look up at his father, and his father nod, and Teddy slide off his lap and pick up that violin case with both hands like it held something breakable and precious, which to him it did. He walked up the center of the lawn, slow and careful, exactly the way he'd practiced walking into the room 100 times in our hallway. He set the case down, took out the violin, tucked it under his chin, looked once at his grandfather, and played. He didn't play it perfectly. He rushed the bridge a little, the way he always did when he was nervous, and one note up high went thin. But he played the whole thing, all the way through, standing in the grass in his green bow tie in front of 100 people, and when he finished and lowered the bow, there was a half-second of nothing, and then the entire tent came apart with applause. Real applause, not polite. And my father-in-law was clapping the hardest of anyone, with his eyes shining, and Teddy's face cracked open into the widest, most uncomplicated grin I have ever seen on a human being. Mariel played after him. She was, as advertised, extraordinary, and Teddy sat in the front row with his violin across his knees and watched her like she was the most amazing thing he'd ever seen. And when she finished, he clapped for her so hard his grandfather had to put a hand on his shoulder to calm him down. The two of them spent the rest of the afternoon comparing calluses by the dock. My mother-in-law found me near the dessert table later. "That was unnecessary," she said, low and tight. "On his birthday." "He picked the day," I said, "not me." She pressed her lips together and walked away. And that, I understood even then, was probably as close to resolved as we were ever going to get with her. Some people decide they were right and they keep that decision in a locked room, and you are simply not given a key. My husband's brother came by and was awkward and decent about it, and said he hadn't realized that Webb had sort of run with the idea, that he was sorry. I told him I appreciated him saying so. I meant it about halfway, which was the most I had. We left before the bonfire. Teddy had eaten cake and 2 more lamb skewers, and he was in that loose, sleepy, slightly stunned state of a kid who has had a very large day and is just beginning to feel the size of it. My father-in-law walked us to the car. He hugged me, which he didn't do often, and held it a beat longer than usual. "I'll call you this week," he said. "Not text. Call." "I'll pick up," I said. On the drive home, Teddy made it 9 minutes before he fell asleep with his head at an angle that looked painful and that he seemed entirely at peace with. I sat in the passenger seat with the velvet box in my lap, my thumb running over the worn leather of the band through the lid. My husband drove with one hand and found mine with the other on the console. "Your dad," I started and didn't finish. "I know," he said. "I heard all of it." He was quiet a moment. "He's never done anything like that in his life. Stood up in front of people. said the thing. His voice did something. He did it for our kid. He did it for our kid, I said. We drove the rest of the way home in the dark, Teddy asleep in the back, the watch in my lap, the road unspooling ahead of us, steady and quiet. The watch lives in my dresser now, in the velvet box, and Teddy knows it's there and knows it's his and knows he gets it when he's older. Some nights he asks to hold it, just to feel how heavy it is, and I let him sit on my bed and turn it over in his hands under the lamp, and then he gives it back and goes to brush his teeth. My father-in-law calls every Wednesday, just after dinner, and he and Teddy have an ongoing negotiation about whether Teddy is allowed to learn the theme from a video game on the violin, which my father-in-law pretends to be scandalized by and is secretly delighted about. The education fund I have never mentioned to anyone, and neither has he, and I've stopped expecting the other shoe. My mother-in-law and I are cordial. We do holidays. We have found a version of the family table that holds as long as nobody leans too hard on the cracked places, which is not the same as healed, but is what we have. And Teddy still plays. He played the anthem again on the 4th of July, for nobody, just standing at the end of our hallway in the spot worn pale in the carpet, the windows open, the evening coming in warm and long, the way it does in early summer. I stood in the kitchen and listened to him get it almost right, rush the same bridge, thin out the same high note, and finish it anyway all the way through, the way he always does. He doesn't know yet that those small, imperfect runs through a song nobody asked for are the thing I'll remember longest. He just plays it because he likes the way it sounds. That's enough. For right now, it's more than enough. What stays with me is not the speech, or the watch, or even the applause. It's the 4 flat rocks Teddy lined up on his palm in the gravel while his whole afternoon was quietly being taken from him, and how he held them out to his father like nothing had happened. He didn't know yet that the kindest people are often the ones the world learns to plan around. I knew it. I've been that person in this family for years, the one who let it be easy, and I had taught everyone, without meaning to, that my son's heartbreak could be handled at a boathouse, so a party could stay pleasant. That's the part I think about most. None of this happened by accident. It happened because a pattern was allowed to keep running. Every time someone smoothed a thing over instead of saying it plainly, the bill got passed down the line, and it kept landing on whoever was least likely to argue. My father-in-law saw that before I let myself see it. And when he finally stood up in that tent at 70 years old, he wasn't being cruel to his wife or his brother. He was breaking a chain. He was deciding that being decent mattered more than being comfortable, and that telling the truth in the open, where it can't be quietly rearranged, is its own kind of courage. I keep coming back to how much it cost him to do it. It would have been so much easier to let Mariel play, clap politely, and drive everyone home unbothered. Easy is seductive. Easy is how good people end up complicit in small cruelties for decades. What it showed me that day was that the right thing usually arrives disguised as the hard thing, and you have to be willing to recognize it and then actually do it, even when your own wife is glaring at you across your birthday cake. I think about what I want Teddy to take from all of it. I want him to be the kind of man who keeps his word to a child, the way his grandfather finally did, because how you treat the people who can't fight back is the truest measure of who you are. I want him to be sharp enough to notice when he's being managed, or when he's the one doing the managing, and honest enough to name it out loud. And I want him to have the backbone his great-grandfather's watch now quietly represents in my dresser drawer, the steadiness to do the uncomfortable thing, and keep standing there until the room goes quiet. He played that anthem imperfectly, rushed the bridge, thinned out the high note, and finished it anyway, all the way through. That's the whole lesson, I think. You won't always get it perfect. You'll get rearranged and overlooked and told to keep it down. Play it through anyway. Stand in the grass and play it all the way to the end. Somebody who loves you is clapping harder than you'll ever know.